The Roaring Twenties, what a time to be alive, as the decade shifted America for better and for worse, as we saw aspiring wealth in America, new forms of entertainment, social reforms with women, African Americans, as well as religious reforms, 3 presidencies which led to economic growth, as well as organized crimes with notorious mobsters and gang leaders. The Roaring Twenties were definitely roaring. In this era, 3 presidents reigned supreme, as corrupt Warren G. Harding followed the footsteps of KKK supporter and nativist Woodrow Wilson, who spread his campaign calling for normalcy all throughout the United States, which would restore America's glory. America's economic system began to stride towards a laissez-faire economic system under the Harding's administration, which lived shortly as Harding passed on August 22nd, as Calvin Coolidge was placed into power the same day. Coolidge and his VP, Charles G. Darwin, would change U.S. economics, determining their fate for the next decade. Finally, Republican Herbert Hoover ran for the election of 1928 against Democrat Alfred E. Smith. Hoover won presidency against the unpopular Democrat. Alongside, the Secretary of Treasury, Andrew Mellon, cried for a supply-side or trickle-down economic system, which would lower the taxes for the wealthy and in turn would make the rich richer and will make everyone else richer as a result. Then the US soon retreated to isolationism after World War I. Aside from the change of economics, there were many social reforms. Women were becoming more independent with the good old help of amendments. They gained the right to vote with the 19th Amendment, and they didn't have to listen to nagging parents anymore. With the help of the Model T, which was affordable and changed transportation forever, they didn't have to live with their parents, and soon many from the countryside started to migrate to the city. They also didn't have to dress like a lady anymore, unlike their Victorian era grandmas who dressed like this. Instead, they traded rib-breaking corsets with revealing skirts and dresses. These women were widely considered as flappers. These were the type of young women you wouldn't want to show to your parents. At the same time, African Americans in northern states were showing resentment towards nativism and the KKK by showing off their culture through literature and, most importantly, blues and jazz, blaring out of their mouths and instruments. This was known as the Harlem Renaissance. A notable contributor to the Harlem Renaissance was Marcus Garvey, who promoted Negro nationalism and glorified African American culture and traditions. Literature also played a major role, since African Americans felt free to write novels about the struggles and pride of African Americans, as notable authors such as Langston Hughes accomplished in this era. Blues and jazz were the music of choice during this decade, and artists such as Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington became icons for their time and are still widely recognized almost a century later. The NAACP also fought to protect African Americans as they preached for black injustices, such as crying out for anti-lynching, the denial of voting rights, racial violence from the KKK, discrimination in employment, and segregated public facilities such as bathrooms. Finally, with these changes, came from the revival of the holy side, of those who believed that these times of booze, jazz, and money were blinding those of religious values. These people were widely known as fundamentalists, and they believed that everything in the Bible is true without error and should be taken seriously, as they rejected Charles Darwin's theory of evolution and believed in creationism. One of the most popular fundamentalists was former pro baseball player Billy Sunday, who would dramatize readings of the Bible to large crowds. An infamous case of fundamentalist movement was during the Scopes monkey trials, as John Thomas Scopes went against the Butler Act, an act that prohibited schools to teach the theory of evolution. in the state of Tennessee. It was one of the first cases to be played out on the radio, and many felt that the trial was rigged as the jury and judge were righteous Christians, and Scopes was later found guilty in the trial.